Did you know that the US Constitution is the oldest written national constitution still in use today? It's true! Yet despite its age, this document has an astonishing power over our lives. For example, every year, more than 70,000 cases are decided by the US Supreme Court, influencing everything from your privacy to your rights at work. And here's a staggering fact. Over 80% of Americans have been affected by a constitutional law, often without even realizing it. In this video, we'll uncover how these constitutional laws aren't just old words on paper, but living forces shaping our society. We'll dive into the hidden ways constitutional amendments have transformed daily life, explore how the Bill of Rights continues to guard our freedoms, and understand the intricate dance between state and federal powers. Plus, we'll look at potential changes on the horizon for 2024 that could redefine what it means to be an American. Stick around to discover how these laws have quietly influenced your life and what might come next. Ready to see how a centuries-old document continues to shape our world? Let's dive in! Chapter 1. The Hidden Threads, Unseen Impacts of Constitutional Amendments. When we think of constitutional amendments, we often focus on the big-ticket items like free speech or the right to bear arms. But what about the quieter, more subtle changes that ripple through society? For example, the 13th Amendment is widely known for abolishing slavery, but did you know it also laid the groundwork for labor laws that protect workers today? Without it, our understanding of freedom might look very different. Consider the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. Beyond the ballot box, this amendment sparked a chain reaction, influencing everything from employment to education for women. A century later, women make up nearly 47% of the US labor force. That's a significant leap from the mere 20% in 1900. Constitutional amendments often have these unintended yet powerful consequences. Another intriguing example is the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age to 18. This wasn't just about getting more young people to vote, it was a response to youth activism during the Vietnam War. The amendment indirectly fueled the growth of youth-driven political movements that we see today. In the 2020 election, voter turnout among 18 to 29-year-olds jumped to 53%, the highest in decades. So, while some amendments may seem straightforward, they often trigger deep, lasting changes. These shifts might not always make headlines, but they shape the society we live in, sometimes in ways we don't immediately recognize. If this video is your jam, subscribe and let's keep the momentum going. Chapter 2. Guardians of Freedom, How the Bill of Rights Protects Modern Life. The Bill of Rights might be over 230 years old, but its impact on modern life is as strong as ever. Think of it as the nation's security blanket, safeguarding our freedoms in a fast-changing world. The First Amendment, for example, is often cited when discussing freedom of speech. But today it's also the backbone of debates over social media censorship. Did you know that around 80% of Americans use social media daily? That's a lot of free speech happening online. Take the Fourth Amendment, which protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures. With the rise of digital surveillance, this amendment is more relevant than ever. A 2021 survey found that 64% of Americans were concerned about how companies use their personal data. Without the Fourth Amendment, your private texts or emails could be fair game for anyone. The Eighth Amendment, prohibiting cruel and unusual punishment, isn't just about the death penalty. It's also a key player in the fight against mass incarceration. The US has about 2.1 million people in prison, the highest rate in the world. This amendment has become a tool for activists pushing for criminal justice reform. The Bill of Rights doesn't just sit on the sidelines. It's actively protecting our freedoms every day in ways that our founding fathers probably never imagined. From social media to privacy, these 10 amendments remain a vital part of the American experience, adapting to protect us in an ever-evolving society. Chapter 3. The Balancing Act. Federalism's Role in a Divided Nation. Federalism, the balance of power between state and federal governments, has been a defining feature of American politics since the Constitution was written. But in today's polarized world, this balance is more crucial than ever. Take healthcare, for instance. The Affordable Care Act, ACA, has been a battleground for federalism. While the federal government set broad guidelines, individual states have the power to implement or resist aspects of the law. This push and pull have led to a patchwork of healthcare systems across the country. Federalism also plays a big role in education. While the federal government provides funding and sets standards, states control what happens in the classroom. This has led to significant differences in educational outcomes. For example, a 2022 report showed that students in Massachusetts scored significantly higher in math and reading compared to those in New Mexico. The gap isn't just about funding, it's about how states choose to prioritize and structure their education systems. Let's not forget the role of federalism in environmental policy. States like California have taken the lead in setting stricter emissions standards than those required by the federal government. This has had a ripple effect, pushing other states and even the federal government to adopt more aggressive climate policies. California, the world's fifth largest economy, has set ambitious goals to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. Federalism might seem like a dry academic concept, but it's at the heart of many of the political debates we see today. It's the reason why policies can look so different depending on where you live. In a nation as diverse as the United States, this balance of power allows for flexibility and innovation, but also creates tension. Understanding federalism is key to understanding the broader political landscape. Chapter 4. The Power of Interpretation, Supreme Court Decisions That Shaped Our World. The U.S. Supreme Court isn't just a courtroom, it's a battleground where the interpretation of the Constitution can change the course of history. One landmark case that comes to mind is Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. This ruling declared racial segregation in public schools unconstitutional, a decision that sparked the civil rights movement. But what's often overlooked is how this case reshaped public education. Before the ruling, nearly 40% of American schools were segregated. Today, while issues of inequality remain, the idea of separate but equal is no longer legally acceptable. Another pivotal case is Roe v. Wade, 1973, which established a woman's right to choose an abortion under the right to privacy. The ruling set the stage for decades of debate and legislation. In fact, as of 2022, over 50% of U.S. states have laws that would restrict or protect abortion rights depending on future Supreme Court rulings. This illustrates how one decision can ripple through generations, influencing laws and lives long after the gavel falls. Let's not forget Citizens United v. FEC 2010, which changed the landscape of political campaigning. By allowing unlimited corporate spending in elections, the decision has dramatically increased the influence of money in politics. In the 2020 election cycle, nearly $14 billion was spent, making it the most expensive election in U.S. history. Critics argue that this ruling has shifted power towards wealthy individuals and corporations, altering the democratic process. These cases show how the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution isn't just legal theory, it's real, with concrete impacts on society. The court's decisions don't just interpret the law, they help shape the world we live in. And as society evolves, the interpretations of these decisions often evolve too, reflecting new understandings and priorities. Chapter 5. Constitutional Rewrites, What 2024 Might Bring to the Table. The U.S. Constitution is often seen as a fixed document, but it's more flexible than you might think. Throughout history, amendments have been proposed to address the evolving needs of society. As we look to 2024, several potential changes are on the horizon. One topic gaining traction is the idea of a constitutional amendment to protect digital privacy. With over 90% of Americans now using the internet, there's growing concern about how personal data is collected and used. An amendment could set clear boundaries for what constitutes a violation of privacy in the digital age. Another possibility is the Equal Rights Amendment, ERA, which has been debated for nearly a century. While it was first proposed in 1923 and passed by Congress in 1972, it has yet to be ratified by enough states. But with the ongoing fight for gender equality, there's renewed momentum behind this amendment. If ratified, the ERA would provide a clearer legal foundation for addressing issues of gender discrimination. Climate change is another area where constitutional changes could emerge. Some advocates are pushing for an amendment that would require the government to protect the environment. With the US rejoining the Paris Agreement in 2021 and the growing impact of climate change, such an amendment could gain support as a necessary step to ensure long-term environmental sustainability. The conversation about constitutional amendments is not just theoretical. As society changes, the Constitution must adapt to reflect new realities. The proposals on the table for 2024 could bring significant shifts in how we live our lives, protect our rights, and interact with our government. It's a reminder that the Constitution is a living document, one that evolves alongside the nation it governs. Chapter 6. Living Document: How Society's Evolution Influences Constitutional Change. The US Constitution is often referred to as a living document, but what does that really mean? It's more than just a catchy phrase. It's a reflection of how the Constitution has adapted over time. When the founders drafted it in 1787, they couldn't have imagined the complexities of modern society. Yet, through amendments and interpretations, the Constitution continues to evolve, just like our nation. Take the 14th Amendment, for example. Originally intended to grant citizenship and equal protection under the law to former slaves, it has since become a cornerstone in various civil rights movements. From same-sex marriage to immigration, the 14th Amendment has been invoked to address a wide range of issues. It's a perfect example of how an amendment can take on new meanings as society changes. Another aspect of this living document is the concept of judicial review, established by Marbury v. Madison in 1803. This power allows the Supreme Court to strike down laws that it finds unconstitutional, effectively updating the Constitution's application to modern circumstances. It's a way for the Constitution to stay relevant without needing constant amendments. Consider also how the First Amendment has adapted to new technologies. In the digital age, questions about free speech have expanded to include online platforms. The debates over whether social media companies can censor content or whether they should be treated as public utilities are all rooted in how we interpret this amendment today. In 2021, a Pew Research Center survey found that 62% of Americans believe social media companies have too much control over the content people see. This shows how modern challenges require us to rethink old principles. The Constitution's ability to change with the times is one of its greatest strengths. It allows the document to serve a nation that looks very different from the one it was originally written for. As society continues to evolve, so too will our interpretation and application of constitutional laws, ensuring that this living document remains relevant for generations to come. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update from us.